So this is more a prerequisite to the field of AI policy, because what I'm going to talk to you about today is mostly data. So it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm going to give you charts and data. What could be more enjoyable than that? And then later on in the talk, I'm going to give you some qualitative sense of what that progress is. But the first thing I want to show you is this. This is 5 years of progress in artificial intelligence. 2014, you have a paper on generative adversarial networks. It's a good paper. It spawned many aspects of AI research, and one of the outputs of it is synthetic imagery. And 5 years later, you're able to generate really, really, really good synthetic imagery, which has some pretty significant implications for society in both positive ways and ways that we should sort of think about carefully. And the question I want to ask you and sort of ask in this talk is if we can predict the thing on the right from the thing on the left. Because mostly, as the talks this afternoon have shown, we're at the thing on the left. We're in 2014 for things like, robotics, other aspects of the field, and there's an assumption they're about to become impactful. And I want to imagine what that could be. So I think, a quick introduction to OpenAI, although thanks very much for the introduction. You've solved most of my problem here. We want to build artificial general intelligence and ensure it benefits all of humanity. And following from Suzanne's talk, we think a hallmark of such a general system would be a highly autonomous singular system that would be able to outperform humans at a lot of work. So that has significant implications. Additionally, we take this seriously to the extent that we're a little weird. And what I mean by that is we have a constitution that governs OpenAI, which says things like, if a value-aligned, safety-conscious project comes close to building AGI before we do, we commit to stop competing with and start assisting this project. And this is actually wired into us at a financial level. We've raised money from investors. We're not a non-profit, but this overrides that. So that means that we think this is serious. We think if we're right, this becomes very serious and we should take it seriously. And the reason why I'm here is that I want to get better at predicting the impacts of AI, because the impacts of AI are going to shape society's views on AI and how well society can adapt to it. So what I want to show you is some forms of meta-analysis here. I think that there's a useful lens we can use to get a sense of where we are in AI that generalizes beyond specific technical things. My co-founder, Ilya Sutskever, he was here last year talking about this graph from OpenAI, which is an analysis of the compute used in landmark results. The main thing about this graph you should pay attention to is that the increase is very, very significant. We're looking at a 300,000-fold increase in computation applies to breakthrough AI systems in the last 5 or 6 years. And it's a mixture of research, like AlphaGo and AlphaGo Zero and other things on the top right, and actual applied systems which are doing real economically valuable work in the world, like neural machine translation from Google, which allowed it to switch over its translation backend from a more structured system to a more neural one, Deep Speech 2 from Baidu, which lets it do speech recognition, all of that stuff. And just to give you a sense of how dramatic this is, that was a log graph, there's the linear graph, maybe something strange is happening. However, this is 5 or 6 years of data. Not only am I a European skeptic, I'm a general skeptic about everything, so I wanted to sort of double-check this data. And what we did at OpenAI is we looked at the prior 20 or 30-year period, and we looked at major research papers in AI and calculated how much compute was used in them, and we produced an analysis which is new that I'm showing you today, which is this. Can anyone notice that this is strange? We actually have like a non-trivial difference. We have the red dots, which are this graph, the last 5 or 6 years, and then we have the dots from prior decades. And these include, machine learning systems that are, based on similar technology that we have today. The sort of yellow-orange line that you can see on this graph is Moore's law. So what this shows us is that for many years, AI research and applications were coupled quite closely to this general increase in computation power. But in recent years, we jumped above that. Now, what does that mean? I think that it means, as many of the people in this room know, a huge amount of money and interest has flooded into this space. And so people are using far larger amounts of computation than they have done before, sometimes to achieve very impressive things, sometimes to achieve things in commercialization, sometimes to achieve things in research, sometimes to do stupid stuff, because that's what everyone does in a field anyway. But it means that we might be sitting here at an important time in history, because we've crossed into a different trend line which has different effects, and we should be aware of that. You can also analyze this at the level of individual things. So we can look at speech recognition over time. You can see 3 systems here developed over radically different periods which track the Moore's law trend closely for the first 2 data points, and then they suddenly jump. And that jump is correlated to significant increases in performance and commercial interest, and should give us a sense of why there's so much kind of dynamicism in the AI space right now. But I think it's good to zoom in. I think this sort of meta-analysis is useful, but it's helpful to go and look at a very specific task. So many people here are probably familiar with ImageNet. A recent trend with ImageNet is the question of how fast we can train it. So if I have a system that can do image recognition and I'm interested in doing commercial stuff with it, I kind of want to know how rapidly I can train a system on new data to come up with insights at an accuracy rate that I find acceptable. So this has become another research benchmark, which should give us a sense of progress and impact. And specifically, in June 2017, the world record for training an ImageNet network to a standardized level of accuracy was about 60 minutes. September 2017, 24 minutes. November 2017, 15 minutes. July 2018, 6.6 minutes. November 2018, 3 minutes and 44 seconds. February 2019, 1 minute and 30 seconds. March 2019, 1,024,000 seconds. That's 42x speed up in 2 years. That's weird. Speed ups like this are weird. You should actually feel kind of ambivalent about this because it's strange. You don't usually get this. It's above what you get with Moore's law. And we could use this type of kind of analysis to answer larger questions about the AI space. We can look at all of the research papers that went into this, and we can ask ourselves what processes are being used. If anyone from Intel is in the audience, I'm sorry for this slide, because it shows that Intel chips were used at one point in 2017. Everything else is an NVIDIA GPU. It's stuff that we kind of know intrinsically, but I think we can apply this analysis to sort of more fruitful ends. A question that many of you are going to ask is, are we getting smarter? Are we just using more computation in a kind of dumb way to get to the sort of interesting place? I'd posit that we probably are getting smarter. If you do this kind of analysis, you can see that we're able to reduce the time while sort of compute resources remain roughly constant. You can do very smart things where you even reduce the compute resources while reducing the time. And this should give us some confidence that there's progress here and impact here. We can also use this type of analysis to ask questions about geopolitics. We can answer questions about where the smart people are and use that to tell us something about society. So the smart people are everywhere, as many of you know. But most importantly, the smart people are now doing this type of work at typically large companies with large amounts of capital, which gives us a sense of how the research field itself is kind of bifurcating into these sort of small compute and large compute domains. And I don't know what the implications are of this, but there are going to be several, and we should be conscious of the fact that this is happening. I also think it's worth asking if it's going to stop. It's probably not going to stop. Here is a paper where people are training a single sort of machine learning model on the largest supercomputer in the world, the Summit computer, 27,600 GPUs. This should give us a sense that this trend is going to continue. And especially for the researchers in the audience, we aren't doing this in a super dumb way. And another bit of analysis from OpenAI looks at the relative computational efficiency of the systems we're doing to sort of apply to this problem. And what you see here is that we've become more efficient at this task of something like image recognition. In fact, about 25 times more efficient when you look at the compute used. So there's real innovation occurring here as well. The reason to show you all of that is that I think it provides some evidence that this might be an unusual time. And we should maybe assume that unusual things are going to happen in the future. Because I don't know about any of you, but I've been mostly surprised for the last few years by a bunch of things that AI has done. And so I'm going to give you just a quick case study on something OpenAI did. This will involve me sounding very, very, very stupid at first, so that's going to be fun for everyone. The specific case study is kind of a belief that we have that the field of synthetic text generation is about here. It's about the 2014, 2015 crossover point that we were at with these sort of synthetic images. And we should try and take this seriously because the implications of synthetic images turned out to be quite significant. GPT-2 is a system that OpenAI developed, which is a large language model. It was sort of good enough that we wanted to be cautious with our approach to it. We adopted a different release strategy, and we generated some controversy because we were breaking with a norm. But I want to give you a visceral sense of why we did this and why we made ourselves culpable for a sense of discussing the implications that we thought this technology might hold. And I think the best way to do that is to give you a sense of progress in this domain. So I'm going to read out state-of-the-art text generation from 2015. The surprised in investors weren't going to raise money. I'm not the company with the time. They are all interesting quickly. Don't have to get off the same programmers. There's a super angel round fundraising. Why do you can do? It's not great, is it? 2016, with even more new technologies coming onto the market quickly during the past 3 years, an increasing number of companies now must tackle the ever-changing and ever-changing environmental challenges online. Check back for updates on this breaking news story. It's work from Google. They basically scaled up machine learning techniques, and they got it to move a bit more forward, but it still has some problems. 2018, here's Google again. They do a fake Wikipedia entry for a law firm that sounds vaguely delicious, called Dewey and LaBeouf LLP, an international law firm headquartered in New York City. It was formed in October 2007 through the combination of Dewey, Ballantyne, Lip, and LaBeouf, Lamb, Green, and McRae LLP. But this is better. This is a lot better than, the surprised in investors weren't going to raise money, I'm not the company, that's gibberish. In just about 3 years, we've got substantially better. And this isn't just Google's show. Here's Facebook. It has been 2 weeks, and the last of my kind has gone. It is only a matter of time until there will be nothing left. I'm not sure what the hell is going on. I can't think. I can hear a distant scream. I wrote a lot of bad fiction in high school. This reads like that. I'm sure it's memorable to some of you as stuff that you may have written at one point in your lives. But it's better. It's a lot better than where we were. And so in 2019, we had a model, and it just moved this forward qualitatively a little. But it feels drastic to us because it's a short amount of time to go from nothing to something. So 2019, we produced this conditional language model. We can write a prompt, like a human writes a prompt, like in a shocking finding, scientists discovered a herd of unicorns living in a remote, previously unexplored valley in the Andes Mountains. Even more surprising to the researchers was the fact the unicorns spoke perfect English. And the completion from the model is pretty good. I have baby girl cousins. I've told them this story. They didn't say, "Go away, Uncle Jack," which I took as sort of a good sign, or Cousin Jack. They're so young, I get confused. Because the completion of it is kind of evocative and interesting. The scientists named the population after their distinctive horn, Ovid's unicorn. These four-horned, silver-white unicorns were previously unknown to science. Now, after almost 2 centuries, the mystery of what sparked this odd phenomenon is finally solved. This is evocative. It's interesting. It actually feels like there's a narrative here, and it may not be perfect, but it's got a lot better. It's the main point I'm trying to communicate. It's got a lot better in a short period of time. And to sort of give you a sense of the space it can cover, here's a prompt in a different domain. A train carriage containing controlled nuclear materials was stolen in Cincinnati today. Its whereabouts are unknown. And the completion is the incident occurred on the downtown train line, which runs from Covington and Ashland stations. In an email to Ohio news outlets, the US Department of Energy said it is working with the Federal Railroad Administration to find the thief. The theft of this nuclear material will have significant negative consequences on public and environmental health, our workforce, and the economy of our nation, said Tom Hicks, the US Energy Secretary. And if you look at the bottom, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission did not immediately release any information. It sort of captured a typical thing that happens in news stories, which is the people don't tell you anything for a while. It's the nature of breaking news. I used to be a journalist. I'm familiar with this feeling. So we did something different. And the reason to do something different is not that we think that GPT-2 in itself is like this amazingly perfect, repeatable, dangerous thing. It's that it's very suggestive of the arc of progress we're on. And we wanted to be cautious and make ourselves culpable for our own caution by being obscenely loud about how cautious we wanted to be. And the purpose of that was to actually start a conversation about culpability. And my general philosophy on culpability is if you make yourself culpable, you learn a lot. And so what we've been learning is that there are different ways to approach sort of the impacts of these AI technologies. Specifically, you don't need to release everything at once. You can release stuff in stages. The advantage of releasing stuff in stages is you generate information at each point in time about how releasing systems with different capabilities has affected the world. You can also do research. We've been doing research on threat modeling with people. Some cheerful people have been fine-tuning GPT-2 to generate ISIS propaganda. So that's sort of calibrated our release philosophy. Other people have looked at the susceptibility of people to fake news generated by GPT-2. Sarah Krebs at Cornell found that people are actually susceptible to GPT-2 and think that it's real news sometimes. That's not to say that it is the thing, it's that it seems to have the hallmarks of something which might be something we need to deal with in a few years. And so where we are now is we're leaning towards the release of the larger system, along with work that we've been doing on detection so that we can help people detect the outputs of such a system when we release it. And this is generally part of our philosophy of sort of culpability or trying to bias towards releasing the actual underlying system. And a journalist said this in August about some of our work. OpenAI wants to move slow and not break anything. I like this idea. I would like it if people in this room wanted to think about ways they could move slowly while still generating commercial opportunity while not breaking things. And I also want to note that it's not obvious where the impacts are going to come from. Because the main impacts that we've seen haven't been sort of malicious, they've been positive. On the left is a book published by GPT-2, which is good to read 10 or 20 pages of. You probably don't want to read the whole thing, but it's kind of there. And on the right is an improv session in Los Angeles where people are performing scripts entirely written by it. So mostly we found the creative stuff has outweighed what could have been the stuff to be cautious about. But what I want to leave you with is that I hope that this talk gives you a sense that there are big macro trends here that are driving certain types of progress far more rapidly than our intuitions suggest. And if we step back and look at how far we're coming, to sort of Suzanne's point in her talk, what happens in 2024? You really, really should think about this because 2024 is incredibly close in AI terms. But the implications of this stuff getting better are pretty significant. So thank you very much, and I hope this was somewhat interesting.